is quite amusing. So now we are live finally because we've learned an important lesson today. Communication is important. If you hear your partner clicking a button and you assume they're clicking the go live button and they haven't, you made eye contact and says, yes, I'm clicking go live, they're not live. Oopsie, I must not kick my table. My cable.
Trust but verify, right?
Yes. Cool. So, welcome everybody to another episode of DevBeardOps with myself and Darko. And for those of you that are wondering about the beard part, it's the beard on the inside that counts.
Exactly.
Your inner sysadmin and developer ops person that wants to make things better in life. So, today we're going to be talking about the concept of how do you know if your app is running. But before we dive into that, Darko, do you want to quickly introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Darko. I am a developer advocate, and I don't have problems with camera as Kobus does. Yet, famous last words. I also get to scream at the camera from time to time, mostly on stream and in the virtual world right now. But hopefully, sometime soon, I get to see you all in person. I'm based in Berlin, Germany, but I am originally from Serbia. And hashtag innerbeard. Absolutely.
Cool.
And you, tell us who you are.
I am a clone of Darko. Do I still have some coffee left? No, I don't. And basically look the same, do the same things, all the DevOpsy things, except I am based out of Cape Town in South Africa. So
he's just
different
south
seasons.
He's just south of me.
A little bit.
Just a little bit south of me. That's fine. It's not. We're even in the same time zone right now. So
yes, awesome. Yeah.
Okay,
so today's topic is a follow-on from the different discussions we've had so far. We start off with discussing different ways to test your app, the different types of tests that you can run, how you use that as a feedback loop, and the different time involved in the different ways of testing your app to get the feedback the quickest that you can, also testing in production.
Right.
And then we went over different deployment strategies, starting off with the famous YOLO one where you just log onto the production box and do things by hand, all the way through to canary deployments and all those. And yes, Darko, it's still a thing. A lot of people do that. I even went to a meetup.
Do you change the code on a text editor on the server in production?
Not only that, I went to a meetup talk years ago where someone was convincing us that that was a great idea to do because, and I quote, it solves the problem immediately and now nothing breaks, except they skipped over the part where make sure you commit that code back to your main repository because guess what's going to happen with the next deploy. But yeah, let's not get into that. Cowboys will be cowboys, and you've got a hat and a belt for that, and also boots. Which reminds me, I'm going to find my cowboy boots. It's almost winter. But yes, today's chat is on how do we know that our app is running, and this to a certain extent boils down to observability. So, cue Darko stage left. What is observability?
Observability is one of the terms that's being kind of overused right now. And actually, if you type observability into Microsoft Word, you'll get a wrong word for some reason. At least that's what I get. And observability is just a combination of a lot of different things. When I first heard observability, I'm like, oh yeah, monitoring. Not just that. It's a bit more. It's just the fact that you can combine a lot of different things when it comes to monitoring, logging, and tracing to do the right thing. So if you have an application that's running in production, what makes you certain that it is running okay? Is it just the monitoring? Is it just the logs? Or is it just the tracing? It's actually a combination of all those things, and your ability to actually react on those changes. Sometimes you spend so much time actually trying to debug all the things. Actually, not debug. Sift through the things you need to do. You have this alert fatigue and a lot of information being thrown at you, and all of a sudden you spend 2 hours trying to find the exact log you need to look into to debug things. So observability or the observability principles help you achieve a much better approach to that.
Yeah. Before we continue, sorry, I forgot to say welcome to all of our viewers and say, is the audio right? And I see a couple of regulars here. Hey, Ian, who will actually be joining us next week when we talk about infrastructure as code. So come visit us next week at the same time for that one. But welcome, everyone. And tell us how things are going. And also, please take part in the conversation. The whole point of this is to have a chat and get feedback from you. Wow. And I even have a friend on Twitter watching. I see here pop in the comment. I'm quite impressed there's someone on Twitter watching it. I just added it for fun. But yeah,
By the way, do let us know if you're using a monitoring solution. What monitoring solution are you using, and
yes.
how happy are you with it? We're not trying to shill you anything. We just want to see what people use. I've started with Nagios or Nagios.
Ooh.
I called it Nagios.
Nobody knows how to pronounce it.
Nobody knows how to pronounce it. I've started with Nagios, and yeah, it was a thing that That's how I learned Linux. Nagios was running on a Linux box, and my former boss back then, told me, "Hey, this is how you do it." And I remember spending days and days in Nano editing Nagios configurations. So,
Yep, Nagios, Zabbix, the good old days with where you had a lot of pets.
oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. We see a
But I
lot of
mean,
people from Toronto, from Singapore. Welcome all.
Yeah, we're actually in all time zones. And we've got Pradeep joining us as well. He's actually one of the solution architects, I believe, out of, I think, Taiwan, but I might be wrong. I can't remember.
Okay.
Yeah. And just quickly, for those, if you've heard the term cattle versus pet before, it's something that gets thrown around quite a lot when you start talking about moving to the cloud. The reason is that when you've got physical service, you give it a name, and that server is very long-lived. You are worried about that server staying up, being alive, and that's why we refer to it as a pet. You care about it, you give it a name, and you don't want bad things to happen to it, because that normally means a lot of things go down. Whereas in cloud world, they are virtual machines, so they come and go, and recreating one is fine. So the reason we refer to them just as cattle is just like you don't name each individual cow in a whole cattle group, because there might be hundreds or thousands of them, and also it's harder to keep track of which one is which in that case. So what you want to do is you want to move away from these hard-coded names and treating these servers like they need to always be there, and there's not another one that can do the same thing and swap it out. So just for those that aren't familiar with that.
And you need those servers, by the way. It's not like that you don't need them. We just approach them differently. And just like taking a step back, how this used to be, how I did my observability back then. Well, it wasn't proper observability. This might be a good point. How not to do observability. Especially this was very common back then when you had your pets, your traditional fixed hosting servers. The way I used to do it, and this is wrong, don't take this as advice, is that I would have physical servers or virtual machines running somewhere in the data center. I would spin them up. I would install the Nagios client on them, the agent. And basically, I would create an entry manually on my Nagios server by logging into the server, opening up Nano, and editing a configuration file and saving it. And that's it. So for monitoring, we had a dashboard, and I could see a bunch of red and and yellow things and something green. Go ahead.
It's not a dashboard. It's an information radiator.
Information radiator. Yes, that's a word now. Okay, so on the information radiator, I had a bunch of greens and yellows and oranges. And if something went wrong, it usually flash red. Okay, something is bad on that server. Then I have to go to the server, log into the server, check the logs.
Yep.
That's not the right way to do it, especially because one of the problems of traditional monitoring is that you get to this alert/monitoring fatigue. That radiator, that dashboard we had, was always orange and red. And it was like every Monday morning, my manager would come and say, okay, how much red can we take away this week? And we literally just counted what we do on the amount of red things we take away from the dashboard. And that's not good. That's just not the way you want to do it, because I no longer consider red a bad thing. It was like, okay, it's there.
Oh yeah.
So you kind of get numb from it.
And it's also, the question comes up, like, if the thing stays red that long, why is it even up there? Because clearly it's not affecting the actual app. Because I'm assuming you won't leave the app broken for weeks on end. Yeah. I hope.
Yeah, exactly. If it can be red for a week, is it really red? Right?
Yes.
That's a good question. So if your alert can be on or in the alert state for a long time, is that really a cause for alert? Because your alert should be really the bad things, so the things you need to act on. So yeah, Kobus, tell me about you mentioned Zabbix at one point, and I see Ian here commenting that he used to heavily recommend Zabbix. What is your experience?
So there was a chunk of Nagios, there was a chunk of Zabbix, there was a chunk of. I'm trying to remember now what it was that I used because I'm getting old and I can't remember things anymore. Your name is John, right?
Derek.
Derek. Okay, Derek. Hey, Derek. It's one of those like literally because I've used almost. Yes, thanks, Ian. I've touched Isigna as well. I want to say there was something. Oh, there was the fun. What's the Windows one? Mom.
Mom, yeah, management.
It's Mom.
Mom, yeah.
Yes, and that one was replaced by something else. But I mean, all those kind of things, like all over the show, and a whole bunch of different things. The one that I did have most fun with actually was probably Datadog. When we finally rolled it out. I did that at I think 3 companies. So, but like years ago. When they were still quite small. And to me, it was like one of those things. It was also at the time when I started working a lot with Chef. And having worked through the slow building up the recipes and rolling them out in one company and then moving to another one to consult there. And like day 2 or 3, you've got all the cookbooks ready for this and you know how to apply them. And you open up the Datadog dashboard and you build a nice dashboard for all the information. And you configure it. And then what you do is you say, push the recipe to Chef, and you can use Knife then to force SSH run the agent, and you just see this dashboard start populating, just like boop, 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 it just pops up. Right. It was like, that was fun. But I mean, I think the first actual thing was log aggregation.
Log aggregation, yeah. And see, that's a very important point. So in my experience, log aggregation was something, relegated to something not so important, because we had all of these pets. It was a server that existed all the time, and if you need a log, you just go to the server and get a log. But that's not good. It's not something you should be doing. I would argue that even back then on a physical server or a virtual machine, you should not be doing it then as well. Things change. Things have a different kind of an approach. So what did you do with logs? How did you aggregate logs?
So first step was just like, okay, we've got all the logs and all these different servers. Let's literally copy the files to a central location. Yeah. Now that is fine. If you only have, like, for example, one application server, one web server, where you could go to that single one set of logs, that's where the log's going to be. Yeah. When you have 2, then you start running into the problem. It gets annoying where, it's not this file, let's jump to the other one, jump between the 2. But by the time you hit 3, it's like, okay, no, this isn't going to work. Yeah. So then the first step is, okay, where do we chuck the logs? How do we do this aggregation? And once again, from years ago, there were basically 2 options available to you. You used effectively the Elk stack, so Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. Or you used Graylog, which, if I remember correctly, it also used Elasticsearch under the hood. I can't remember. But those were the 2 main ones, basically, that were available to do that. Yeah. Which is great. So we threw all of our logs into the central location and then, hit the next fun one. Because if you've got text, you need to be able to index the text. Okay. And then we had the long discussions around what is the formatting of the logs. Because now, all of a sudden, we want to be able to search across multiple different log sources that output the logs in different shapes. And I mean, something as simple as the date format is a problem, because also that's where you start learning that, listen, your servers should preferably be in UTC, and the applications deal with the time zones and things, because time zones are really, really, really hard. Because then what happened there is, like, we had some in different time zones because we used the server's time zone to actually display data on the website and the apps and things. And clearly that was easy because now the UI is at least updated. Now all of a sudden you've got logs and you have to shift them different times because of things that just became a mess. Now, granted, luckily there's a lot of tooling for that to do it for you automatically, but it just makes things dirty. So spend a lot of time figuring out how to do log patterns and things. And then things like Fluentd started coming around to help you with that. There was another one. So basically, Logstash, configs to do that, and then log beats, and then setting up that whole infrastructure is also a lot of fun.
By the way, just for the audience here, you may notice that a pattern in our streams is that first part of the stream is old guys reminiscing about old technology. This is not the whole crux of the stream, but we like to introduce how things used to be and how things have changed since the time. And also, we like to reminisce about old technology because it was fun back then. Not that it's not fun now, but it was a different kind of fun back then. Okay, let's stay on the topic of log aggregation. How would somebody, how would you, a developer now, on AWS get your logs aggregated? What would be the simplest step for you to do, right? If you're running all of the things on AWS.
So the very simplest one, and this is the keyword here, simplest is probably just to switch on CloudWatch and have all the live stream there, because we've got integrations for most of the servers by now and just sending it over there. But you might not like the way that you search the logs there and how they are aggregated and how you do all of that.
Correct.
Yeah. So this comes down to preference and how you want to use it.
Yeah. So basically, use the function of CloudWatch logs to ship logs from your EC2 instances to CloudWatch. Now, you have the flexibility to choose whatever log you want, whatever file you want to basically stream from that EC2 instance to CloudWatch logs. There is a search option in CloudWatch logs, which is okay-ish, not the best of things. You need to really start to format your log streams and log groups a bit better, so it would be easier for you to kind of follow up. That's the simplest way to start, right? It just takes a couple of clicks and some money. By the way, it costs money to ship logs to a logging service, and it's not just for CloudWatch; it's for any logging service you use. The more logs you have, the more expensive it is. Even if you host the logging service yourself, you're just going to keep overloading it. So how do you get around that? How do you get around expensive logs?
That's where you start, as with most answers to if it's expensive as a managed service, is go build your own.
Okay.
And that's where it starts getting interesting, because there are a couple of components to that. The first one is that you need something that, because the logs are generally either locally or there's something running locally that accepts the stream and then sends it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that's something like, for example, Fluentd or Logstash running with FileBeats, where FileBeats is just a sub app, or in the the Elastic suite of things that monitors files in a certain interval and then automatically sends them off to a Logstash instance. So, and then something needs to be able to receive that, and that's where the infrastructure comes in. Because when you start streaming logs, you're quickly going to realize that you might have large volume, and B, kind of don't want to lose logs.
Yeah.
So then it starts getting interesting, because then the typical pattern that I've seen used is that there's something that sends it to a central collector that's highly available. And sorry, my cable is wonky. I moved it today, so I must sit very still on this wooden floor. Is you send it to the central receiver, and that receiver needs to be highly available, because if that drops, you lose logs. That then takes it and pops it somewhere. That somewhere being something like, let's say, Elastic Cache, or some kind of persistence of something at least that can, or a queuing system that can keep it in place for a while. And then from there, you pop it, and once normally it's another Logstash instance then that reads from that and actually puts it into your final destination, which is also then highly available.
That's a good point, but I kind of have a counterpoint to that, is that do you need to log all of it? So, but hear me out. This is where people tend to I'll just turn on verbose logging for all my stuff, and I'll be sure to have all my information. And I have to keep all my logs forever. And yes, logs are text files, easily compressible. I get that still. And kind of a question here is from Varad coming in. Do we face a bottleneck problem with logging using CloudWatch if logging is enabled for a high number of services at the same time? CloudWatch Logs has its service quotas, and I've actually just looked them up. The batch size is 1 megabyte, but you should not care about that. But there is 50 transactions per second for creating a log stream. And this thing you can increase, but you will not be creating more log streams as you go along, usually, right? So you should be pretty fine when it comes to CloudWatch logs and sending the logs from your instances to there. So I see no problem you running into problems. If you use something like custom logging, like you want to custom push logs, because you can do that, you can push logs to CloudWatch. You can also handle the errors, and if you're getting throttled, you can also handle the stuff there. But on the point about not having to log all the things, right? So there you go. This is Live's comments. It's important part of logging is how you log as well. For example, verbose logging is going to get you a lot more difficult to search. Think about for your application as well. logging is not just data you throw at things and trying to figure it out. And in the modern world, you absolutely can do that. You can log, you can take all of your verbose logs, funnel them into a data lake, and then do things with magic and try to figure it out. But do you need to do that? Like, is that necessary? I've seen situations where people would have specific triggers. If, for example, an application error rate goes beyond a certain threshold, the application itself enables verbose logging. And then you start getting verbose logging if something is a problem. So there are a couple of approaches you can do there. You can have the application do it itself. You can have an external process monitoring a couple of metrics, or getting a failure rate or something, and then enabling that externally. And then you there's a chance you might miss out on a thing, absolutely. But at the same time, you will save a lot of money. So and a lot of mess in searching all of those logs.
But I mean, the important thing also with logging is to realize, don't just log things like all the errors. Log business things as well. For example, if you've got an e-commerce site and you're selling, every time someone adds something to a cart, removes it from a cart, clears the cart, starts checkout, ends checkout, all of those things, add that to the logs, because those are important business metrics. Because remember, you now want to go back to the logs afterwards to troubleshoot. So you need to be able to see what did the user actually do, where in the code did or didn't it go. So if you just see transaction failed with a stack trace, you don't know necessarily what flow they made. So that's important to know about. So think about those things when you log.
I've heard a lot of these great things about, if you do not, you cannot improve what you do not measure, right?
Yes.
The same comes for logging, right? You should measure all the important things. It's not just about the fact I'm gonna measure my error rates. Yeah, there you go. You're just measuring your error rates or something. Measure how long does a transaction take. Log how long does well, it's not even a log. It's in this case it's just a metric, right? A gathering metric. So how long does a customer transaction take? So if you have like an e-commerce website and somebody goes and clicks buy, how much milliseconds or seconds does it take to the thing to process? And if all of a sudden you start seeing things like, okay, I see a sudden increase in my processing time, something potentially is not good. You can see that I have not done something good. Some change has happened to cause this. And then you can go ahead and try to investigate further, right?
It's one of those things where the first time I used New Relic, and once again, this is years ago, this is the first one I was exposed to, with that kind of like, you take the New Relic and it's got SDKs that you drop into your applications, and then you a little bit of config like an API key, and all of a sudden it starts piping things, and you've got this dashboard where you can see, listen, how long a web page load's taking, how long are SQL queries taking. I was just like, holy crap, this is cool. Because before then, the way I was doing it is SQL Server, enable the profiler, which it adds load to the system, leave it running during peak times, stop it, then analyze the profile and see which queries took long, what was the issue, and all those kind of things. So like when those tools started becoming mainstream, it's like, this is awesome. You've got the tools available, use them.
It is. And from my early career, I was always under the impression the most important thing you need to monitor is your CPU utilization and your memory, and maybe some network traffic. And but no, one of the things I've and Kobus, you might know this because you work with databases, slow queries. What's a slow query? Can you tell me your top slow queries?
Yes.
And this is where that can help you a lot.
Where I blame Ruby on Rails. Ruby on Rails.
By
far. So a little bit of background here. So Ruby on Rails, Ruby specifically tries to make things as easy as possible for the developer. And they've got a very nice way of building out your database, which means a developer doesn't really need to know SQL, and they don't really need to know about databases. And what happened in this case was that the system was built using this with not understanding how things are joined. So they had a one-to-many, which is a one-to-a-collection mapping, and then they had 2 or 3 deep other many-to-many collections mapped to that, which in the code was just like, I could go, I'm just trying to remember what it was like. Let's say transactions dot all sales dot users from the US dot something else, which single line of code, like literally this long, would then result in a query that would kill the database for 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Some of them were actually quite long. And the reason for that is that it takes table 1, left outer joins table 2, left out the joins on multiple fields, a third table, then a fourth
Yeah.
table, and it's a many-to-many mapping. So it's like you end up with table scans instead of just indexes, because once again, if you're a developer and you don't know about how do I check my database is working and how the data has been connected, you probably didn't put indexes in place. And that was the biggest mess that I've had to deal with regards to that.
But there's the thing. You wouldn't know that if you didn't have this information, right? If you didn't have these slow queries things. So even if your developer thinks, or you think, this is amazing, this just works, does it? Is this the best way is this the best thing you can do? Of course, I'm not talking about, trying to super optimize things, going into assembly language and trying to do crazy things. But sometimes you may notice spikes, you may notice things that are outstanding, some things that are like, okay, for some reason, this query is taking longer. Why is it? Is there a difference between the other queries? And this is where you can kind of start to improve. And if you or your manager or your boss is asking, why are you spending so much time and effort on monitoring? Why are you investing so much money? Why do we need to pay for New Relic, CloudWatch, or Datadog? Tell them, you can put a financial value to the things you fix. You understand how much each commit of code could potentially cost you, because if somebody makes a bad piece of code, you may not even know it, but over the span of the year, you will spend a lot of money on that unoptimized code. So it is important to track those things. Now, do we have a list of things you need to track right now? No. As with a lot of things, it depends. It depends what your application does. It depends how you value, what elements you have and how you value them, right? So if you have a database, if you have a non-SQL database, a lot of things here are up in the air. But it is also very important to keep track of those things.
And also very important lesson from the Phoenix Project, great book, is that you need to work where the bottleneck is. And once again, referring back to New Relic, what happens is it looks at the time a query takes and combines the amount of times it's called. So if you've got one query that takes 10 minutes but is called once a day, that might not be the best one to fix. If you've got one that takes 50 seconds and it's run 50 times a minute, guess which one you should be focusing on.
Yeah.
So
we tend to, as engineers, as developers, tend to get focused on things that are most closer to us, or the things we notice. A spike on a graph might be, we need to fix this because it's the most visible thing. But sometimes the little invisible things kind of tend to pile up on you and break things in the long run. So it's important to understand the wider context of a specific thing. Yeah.
And good point here by Dan MBA in the chat, which is monitoring service does have a cost, but the alternative is you need to get extra engineers to continually open up log files and do these things.
Exactly.
Which is
which is not the best thing.
The other interesting scenario that I dealt with, which I know not many people may have encountered, is when, and we'll get to tracing in a little bit, we're able to trace a call that goes through the system through multiple different services, is what if, because of regulations, you're explicitly not allowed to do that?
Yeah.
So here's the scenario.
Okay.
Health data. I worked in a system where we would receive wearable data, and then it would come into the ingestion layer of the APIs, and then in the back end, we would do all sorts of analysis on the data. The thing, however, is because this is a person's health data, we as developers were not allowed to know who this person was.
Right.
So what we had done is there was an ingestion system that was built that would take the data, assign a GUID to it, and then what would happen is it would know a mapping from that GUID to a second GUID. And in the backend system, which the developers had access to, you would only ever see a GUID, and there was no way for you to from there go and see in the front end. The problem, however, is that
okay. I wasn't sure.
GUID, a GUID.
GUID. Okay.
It's a GUID. It's like Nagios.
Nagios, yeah. GUID and GUID. Okay, good.
GUID, yes.
It's global unique identifier.
Yes.
Identity designator, whatever.
That's also a whole interesting field of study in terms of how those are generated and what they mean and the problems they cause in your database if they're too random. Not going to get into that today. But in any case, so that system was interesting because we had the thing where we split the way that we could look at the log and the log aggregation, because you cannot combine those two. Because guess what? If you've got all of the logs in one place, you just go look for that one log that says this request incoming with GUID 1. And when there was another one for the next part of the system, GUID 2, and now all of a sudden you can tie the person's details together. So that was quite an interesting one, having to build systems then to be able to give you the information and say, okay, well, ultimately, this is what we're seeing with this one specific GUID, and then a whole different team dealt with it.
Good morning, everybody. By the way, we're on the half hour, so just to say hello to everybody who joined. Welcome to another edition of DevBeardOps, where two bald beard guys talk about technology. And today's topic is your app running? Or we're talking about observability, monitoring, logging, tracing, alerting. It's a free-form discussion, no slides, nothing. We just discuss, and feel free to comment. Feel free to let us know what you do. And on that topic, I have a question for all of you. Do you have alerting set up in your environments? Do you get messages? Do you get paged? And if you do, for what do you get paged? So I want to see what are these things you all get notified of if something goes bad. You don't have to give me the details. Just tell me on what kind of metrics are you being done then.
Printer paper up, printer toner up, can't print, network down.
Yeah. And I have a very strong opinion on alerting because I'm not sure if you were on call, but I'm sure you were. I was on call, and I had to have a phone with me, and the phone was just ringing all the time. And when I was on call, I had to take my laptop with me wherever I go, and it was not the funnest of things, but it's a job. It's okay.
Hey, I got a BlackBerry 8800 out of it. It was worth it.
Ooh, I had an 8750, I believe. But yeah, one of the things about alerting is that alerting is also a big art, right? So what do you alert on? Who do you alert? And when do you alert? Because here's the thing. If an alert does not have an action, if there's no runbook connected to it, if there's not something that, something that you need to do then, why are you alerting somebody? Why is that page being sent out? Just for me to know? Why? Yeah.
The high CPU, classic good example at the moment. Why do you alert on high CPU if you're not doing anything about it? It's a classic. I used to do that because I thought, knowing that the CPU is close to 100% is important. It's like a little bit of cargo cult where, I read people monitoring on CPU and setting a threshold, so I put that in place.
And I mean, so I used to do that, and it was also the thing like, okay, well, sometimes high CPU utilization may be the proper place to get a notification. But unless you're going to do something about it, you should not get that document. If I now get a page saying that my production server is using 100% CPU, unless I get that page and just say, hey, Cobus, I need to fix this, I should not get that page. So it is very important that anytime you receive an alert, a page, an SMS, whatever, it's really important that you have a thing to do if you got that alert. If you got that alert as just an FYI, you're just getting stressed. So, yeah.
And it's like crying wolf too many times. After the third time, nobody's going to bother anymore. And then, you know what? Your system is actually down.
Yeah. Alert fatigue. You get alert fatigue and just like, I will just ignore it. And then something really bad happens. And then that's a problem. And my camera died. Hello.
And there we go, Docker. You did jinx it by saying, I don't have these problems.
I need to screenshot this because I need to complain about my camera.
At least you're smiling.
At least I'm smiling, yeah. By the way, Canon, thank you.
And now it's just Doc. It's no longer Doco, by the way, for those wondering. This is his alter ego.
It's my alter ego, the Dark.
Yes.
So we have a bunch of comments here coming in from people.
Yes.
Cost-based notifications as of now.
Yes.
Now, cost-based notifications are interesting because you should be notified, and this is a big question. We can talk about this until the end of the days. I had people ask me, can I put cost-based blockages in place? Like if your production workload is going over a certain threshold, can I put like a thing to stop it?
That's dangerous.
That's dangerous.
So dangerous.
Yeah, because there are cases where you want to do it if you get hijacked or something, right? I get it. But an alert here is more important. And Varad mentions here that he is using cost-based notifications. Notifications here are better. Right? You'll get pinged. You'll get a page. You say, okay, production is all of a sudden going high. That's where you need to make a decision. Why is this happening? Should I act on this? So that's one of the things that don't necessarily have to have an action, but this is where you make the decision. But let me ask you, Kobus, in a perfect world, you are setting up cost-based notifications. What do you want in that notification?
I do not set up notifications like that. Do you know what I do have?
What do you?
On our famous dashboard/information radiator,
Okay.
you've got the pyramids or the sandwiches of cost, basically.
Okay.
Which is a real-time summary of your cost. And what I used to do is I used to show a 3-month graph of it. So basically all you had is like just a small part. It doesn't have to be big because you're just looking at the shape. Is as you're incurring costs, it creates this nice little pyramid until it gets to the end of the month and it drops down again. And then it starts going up again. The reason for that is by having a rolling 3-month thing, all you're doing is visually looking is, do the 3 triangles or saws of the or teeth of the saw look roughly the same?
Yeah.
If not, that's when you start paying attention, because what you'll see is, let's say we suddenly did something like we changed the database to auto scale up to max size. That thing will go up like that, and then all of a sudden you'll see the angle start doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a very good point, because a single data point in isolation means nothing. Like if you get you have breached your $2,000 a month spending limit. What does that mean? Why? What do I do with that information? So in an ideal world, you get a link. Oh my, what's wrong with my camera?
It's your cable. Stand still.
It's not I'm not even touching the desk. This happened to me yesterday 5 times on a conference. I need to get a new camera. So the thing that's my camera will come up at any point. Look at Darko right now. When we talk about getting like proper information for a cost notification, this is where you should get the number, you should get the graph, like Kobus says, the little triangle, seeing is this the thing that happens usually? Is this the cost we usually cross? And also, one additional thing that I would love to have on a cost notification is like the last 5 changes.
Yeah.
If I know that a change has happened in the last 5 things, I am pretty happy to know that this is the thing that caused it, and I can react to it.
But we can definitely chat about that in, I think, next week's session and the session after that with Ian, when we touched on infrastructure as code. The reason is that there's a movement currently where people are actually building it into different infrastructure creation tools, where it actually, because you know exactly what it is you're creating, in which region, what the pricing are for the different resources, you can actually output, this is what the stack costs as a baseline without, let's say, data processing costs and those kind of things. And I know there's a project for Terraform that does it. I'm fairly certain there's one for CDK as well that I saw recently.
Good.
Yeah.
Just answer a question here. Sam made a bot question to about. I don't think our bot knows that, but what is this about? This is 2 bald, bearded guys talking about technology and the cloud, and we're talking about, is your application running? And I'm struggling with my camera, but just a general banter on DevOps, on monitoring, on observability, logging, tracing, alerting right now. So I see a lot of comments here as well. So
we need to work through them a little bit.
PagerDuty. I see Ian is mentioning Slack plus PagerDuty metrics like 4xx, 5xx, database connections, CPU memory thresholds. But in the large environment, my favorite is the lack of expected traffic log volume.
Yes. That is so important. It's one of those, like, you can also, and once again, so I'm going to be referring to a lot of things like, for example, New Relic and Datadog in today's talk. This is purely the services that I used at some point in the past. It doesn't mean that those are the ones you should be doing right now. It's just I used them and I had success with them. Datadog had also what it was called an absence of metric thing, which is awesome to do as well, where it says, like, if these metrics are missing for X amount of time, let us know. For example, sales, because you could set up custom metrics, because then you know something is definitely broken, because your system should not be quiet based on certain parameters, but it differs on what you're doing.
Yeah. So good. A lot of comments here. CCTOS 1655. You're doing a proof of concept for Datadog in the next weeks. Let us know. I mentioned this before. I love how Datadog looks. Never used it. But Kobus has.
Yes. What I would suggest there is, as with any, and this applies pretty much to any vendor out there, if you're doing a proof of concept, ping their sales team. I know in general developers do not want to touch sales, but what will happen is that, because remember, this is technical pre-sales, They want to show you the best way to use their product, and they will actually have engineers that help you set things up and get going quickly, and probably provide you with a free account and credits to play around with. So definitely ping them and ask this. Most companies work this way. Whether or not Datadogs does at this point in time, I do not know. But like I said, most companies are incentivized to try and help you with these. So reach out, because then you get the best way of looking at the things, and they'll show you all the fun features and nifty things, advanced features, etc.
Fair point. So Ian, let us know. Do you like these messages are getting to a Slack and page? Like, do you get paged if a certain error rate is a certain error rate has been overreached, or is there something you need to do if that happens? Because that's my whole point, right? If I get a message saying that 5xx is happening, and that's it. Like, do I have to do something about it? And what do I need to do it? Usually, in the best case scenario, if you get an alert saying, you have breached the threshold of 500 error rate on your application, here's a run book. Here's what you should do. This is where you go and check and all those things. So, good.
That's usually super useful for when you've got a mix of junior and senior people, and also it makes onboarding people simpler. It's like saying, listen, you're now on call, here's the playbook or the run book for when you do this, then do this. And I mean, if it's automated in Slack saying, listen, click this link to start seeing what you need to do, that's great, because it might just be something small, it might be something big, and you as a new person to the team, whether or not you're junior or senior, needs to know, what is the action we take? Do I call someone? Have I got an on-call buddy, etc.?
Yeah. That's kind of a thing. So, good. DP the Gray says, I have a simple Slack Node.js application running on an EC2 T2 small instance with PM2 and DB in database in RDS. And when I hit the send to Slack button, app crashes. Nginx logs say upstream permanently closed and browser 526. I'm not sure what that is about.
That's hard to troubleshoot.
It's hard to troubleshoot. Make sure that you have those logs. I mean, you said that you don't see anything in logs. I mean, maybe enable some verbose logging, because you can always enable debug logging on those things. So my advice for you there. The answer is most of the times in logs, but as long as you have the logs properly set up.
Yeah, if it's just this upstream thing, it could be networking, it could be permission, it could be a firewall blocking you. It's hard to say without digging into it more and figuring out exactly what the error is.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
Some people commenting about alerting for my camera dying. I wish there was an alert
Of course.
for my camera dying. Yeah. Well, you get the alert. You get the colors.
I was actually just going to, because I've also got a Canon. I know there's a open source thing called Magic Lantern, which basically replaces the firmware on the camera to do things and it's super scriptable with Lua, etc. Because all that I want is two things. One, when you switch on the camera, power settings, display set to never go to sleep, because every single time I switch it off, it's set to 1 minute and I have to go switch it on manually. Then 2 levels up, 3 levels to the side, autofocus on eyes and face, not just on object, because that means that otherwise I've had times where it focuses on the unicorn or the bullhead behind me, which is quite amusing. Because every single time I switch it on, and that's partially why my camera cable is so dodgy, is because I press on it and wear it out.
Yep.
Yeah, I would love that automation.
I cannot get Magic Lantern on this one, unfortunately. So this one is stock all the way. So from Growly Powley, great banter. I used to point to the radiators of information and suggest everybody fix things faster. Then through Datadog and the DevOps guys got very clever, and during the day fired conversational style alerts into Slack. The team were also acknowledging PagerDuty alerts in Slack apps and their Apple Watches, then getting back to console keyboard quickly. Clever bunch of devs with my pleasure to know. People get creative ways to do them, right? To do these things. But it is always important that if you alert people, Slack is a great way to do it. But if you're getting alert for everything, every time your CPU breaches 70%, people will just start ignoring it. So make your alerts very meaningful. Just a sidestep here, the Mr. Hex here, 0xF00B.
Fuba. It's Fuba.
Fuba. Okay. Says, I've always been confused by runbooks. If I'm able to write things down like if this, then this, why isn't it already a script that executes when that is true? Go ahead.
Because not everything you interact with is necessarily a system or is a system with an API that you can call. And yes, with enough bash commands and sed and awk, you can probably get anything done. Certain things like, for example, on this system, if I see error X, go check 3 systems away for, is that happening over there? For example, this system is having issues. Is the database under load, or is some downstream provider having some kind of issue, or things like that? It's basically just a mechanism for troubleshooting things that aren't as simple as, let's automate it. Or let's be realistic. Not everybody has the capacity to automate everything and has had time to do it. So it's just a case of we want to get there. This doesn't happen often enough for us to invest time in here. Because there's that.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say there's that famous XKD CD one. Let me actually bring it up about how much time you should invest in automation.
And while Cobus is doing that, just understand that the term runbook was not born in IT. The runbook term is just old, right? It's just a series of things you need to run through to finish a task. Usually it was a physical paper where things would be written down, and to do X. Runbooks takes you from state A to state B, right? You always know the outcome of a runbook, or you should. Hence, it could be anything. I worked in companies where we literally had like binders with papers to explain how to create a user, how to do that and that. So it is one of the ways to do it, and that is the thing. You can zoom in a bit, Cobus, so people can see.
Let me just. No. Hold on. This is now me going to break Windows again. Yes. Okay, I'm not going to zoom in. Go away, Darko. I still have to figure that out on Windows. I'm not a Windows user. How do I zoom? Okay, never mind. Okay, but in any case, what you can do is go search for XKCD and automation, and you'll get this graph. But basically, what it does, it says that on the one axis is the y-axis is how much time can you shave off a task, and also then at the x-axis at the top is how much time do you spend on it, or how much time does a task take. And then what this thing grid shows you is over 5 years, how much time would you have saved? So let's say a task takes 1 second, but I spend, let's look at them. Top left, if the task itself saves me 1 second, and I do it 50 times a day, then I can invest 1 full day in automating it. And if it takes longer than 1 full day, it means that I'm spending more time automating it than I will spend over the next 5 years. Let that sink in. 5 years. So
exactly.
Don't just automate for the sake of automation, where if you've got a run book and it takes you 2 seconds to read the run book and then 1 minute to apply it for something that happens twice a year, don't spend 5 days automating it, because you will never get that time back.
Yep. That's the whole point. So good. Sometimes not all the things need to be automated. It's fun to automate things. Don't get me wrong. I automate things as a pastime activity, but not all the things. not all the things need to be done. Like I have a little thing to download things off the internet on my server here. So instead of SSHing it to the server and just turning that on and doing all the things, I made a little automation thing that does it all for me. I just run a command and it just completes a bunch of steps for me. Not because it's faster, it's just because it was fun to do. So yeah.
I used to run all my home servers, and I used to have, I think at peak I had 5, as in full-blown microservers running with various things and fully configured with Chef, and I kept the cookbooks and everything up to date and did all of that. I'm now down to 1 server and a whole bunch of Docker Compose files that I just chuck in a Git repo, because it works, and if it goes down, I can fix it tomorrow. It's not mission critical.
I've actually made a little. I have a little repository in GitHub. I basically, they're my script files, my binary files. I shared it here. They're not binaries; they're just shell scripts that do things that are kind of silly for me, like like doing a screenshot, or even recording a screen, or playing a piece of music. I can do it in like my command line to point it to this directory, but I can just like play, and it will play a random song from my music directory. So it's automating things is fun.
the awkward moment where you have to explain, why is it Brittany and why is this on favorites?
Exactly. But yes, so let's actually slowly wrap this up, but with one topic. And I want us to mention this. So we talked about what should you monitor, your logging, the different ways of things you should log. We talked a bit about alerting. Now tracing. Let's talk about tracing. So you mentioned tracing once, but do explain to us what is exactly tracing.
So tracing is the act of picture microservice architecture where a request comes in to do something, and then it flows through multiple different systems, and then ultimately sends a result back to the user. How do you know everything that was involved with that one call from the user's perspective? Because across logs, because remember, if you've got a log-based system, you now have got 5, 10, 15 different places where there's a single log line that you want to see in sequence for this one thing that happened. Well, that's where tracing comes in. So there are different ways of doing it. One of the ways is that it attaches an additional HTTP header to your request with, let's say, another GUID or GUID. And then that is attached to every system as it goes through with the log file, which means then that your log aggregation system can take all of the data and actually show all the logs for that one thing, but also the actual tracing system is also integrated with each of these different APIs, and can also then get that information to show you, for example, a graph of it went through these 10 systems, this is how long it took for each one of those steps.
Right. And that's very important because I mentioned this in the past, like a data point in isolation means nothing. The same comes from a log entry. A single log entry in isolation does not provide you with a lot of information usually. And if you can set up tracing, that is to track a call, or not a call, track a thing, track an action, a user interaction from the beginning. So from the moment the user has logged into your website to the moment they have checked out an item, you need to be able to trace that. And not just for the fact of troubleshooting problems, but you will also find bottlenecks. Like we mentioned this, does the user checkout process take 5 seconds longer? Why? Unless you manually try to find each of the elements it does and trying to kind of piece them together, you will have a difficulty finding where the bottleneck is. And with tracing, it's relatively easy to see what took the longest. And is that correct? Should it be that way or not? So yeah, that's kind of the point.
Yeah, and it's useful. It's like one of those things, like I often view it as like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs in terms of what you're dealing with. And typically the first level is you need some kind of logging to at least know something is happening in your system. Then you start going, okay, how do I get more real-time feedback? And that's where you jump into the whole metrics. Then you realize, now that I can see what's happening, I need to be told when something breaks, because I can't keep my eyes on the metrics every single second of the day. Then you get alerting. And then you get to, okay, cool, now let's look at the system as a whole. We start looking at tracing. You start looking at database query performance, all of that. And then at the top, you tend to get to the whole observability, where you combine a whole bunch of different things to get a proper view of what is actually happening in your system and understanding it.
Understanding what is happening in your system is not just a single thing. You need to have a bunch of different things. Ideal scenario, you have an error, something's wrong, you get an alert, you get a page, there is a high 500 error rate happening right now. You get a page, on that page, you get a run book. What do you need to do? You get a link to the dashboard, monitoring that system. You get graphs of things that's happening. You get access to logs on that machine immediately. But also you get access to traces of a couple of those 500 error calls and how did they look through the entire pipeline. That, for you as a developer or engineer, makes things so much easier to figure out. And I'm not even talking about automating stuff. I'm just talking about you manually fixing stuff, because you have all the things here presented with you. You don't have to log dive, and log dive can take a chunk of your day.
You get very good with grep. I mean, I used to do so many layers of grepping and then tailing and things. It's just like, yes, you can. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
You should, exactly. So there's a lot of tools out there to help you. We mentioned a bunch of things out there to help you with monitoring. Your CloudWatches, your Datadogs, your New Relics. If you want to go the classic route, your Zavexes and your Nagioses, Nagioses, whatever. For your alerting, PagerDuty. I mean, CloudWatch can do. CloudWatch can also do alerting with SNS. With tracing, if you want to talk about tracing on AWS, you always have to look into the X-Ray, AWS X-Ray service. It's just a great thing to do. It takes a while for you to integrate it, unless you're using serverless functions and Lambda, and Python. And then you have like the power tools for Python, Lambda, which are just great. Just 3 lines of code and it works. A bunch of different things can help you on that. And to answer the question here from DP the Gray, the question is, how do I get the runbook automatically? Or I guess that you're asking how to execute runbooks automatically. Well, on AWS, there's a service called AWS Systems Manager, and it has basically a runbook feature. It's not called runbooks. Are they called runbooks? They're called documents.
They
They're
run
called
documents, yeah.
Run documents,
Documents
yeah.
that
But
you use the run task to run with.
exactly. So basically, those are just JSON or YAML documents that you define different steps to do certain things. Again, as Kobe said before, it's not all just interacting with systems. Sometimes you need to talk to a person. Sometimes you need to alert somebody. So
sometimes you need to integrate a Jenkins job to reboot a server because Elixir was doing weird things that only happens once every 2 weeks, and you want to enable users. Not that I would ever do this or advocate for doing this.
yeah. So there you go. But sometimes, not all the things are very systematic. But that's why runbooks can and should be automated where you can, if it makes sense. But sometimes you just have to do things manually.
But I mean, also
go ahead. I want to mention
just
one
quickly.
more thing.
The other thing you can do is that you can have a wiki with all the different runbooks, which they should be centrally stored at the very least. You don't want a document being mailed around. Please don't do that. And then what you can do is in certain of the alerts, you can actually, as part of the body of the alert, have that link to that runbook saying, listen, this weird scenario comes up. Here's the runbook. Click on it immediately, because then it's just click and then go and then get to it.
Yep. Exactly. Just one last thing before we finish, because we're like 4 minutes out. We haven't talked about this, but this is a really an interesting topic, especially if your company begins to grow. We talked about alerting, and that there's an importance about should you be alerted, but how many of you know who should you notify? That's a very good question, because, yes, who should get the page? Is it the person on call? What is the escalation path? Do you know who? Because people might be not available. Even if you're on call, I might be sick. I might have lose internet. What's the escalation path? So besides defining your runbooks and your alerts and all that stuff, define an escalation path to see who should else get. You should not blast a page to all of your developers, and because that just doesn't work. But yeah.
A good test for this is use the scenario. It's 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning. Something just broke. Who's the next person in line that I can pull to help me with this? Because that generally will make you be very careful about, because you can't just phone 5 people or 10 people, because then you'll have n-1 people angry at you until you get to the right person.
It depends, because unless something has terribly gone wrong, and I'm talking about things breaking, your production going down, then you have the absolute free will to page everybody, right? And that's fine. Yeah. So we're talking about things, error rates and things that are potentially problematic, and you need to keep on, Sev 1s. So if you have a Sev 1,
yes,
you can wake up your CEO. That's the amount of things you can do, right? But if you're having just your general day-to-day operations, and a problem comes in and error rates are high, or there's a problem with user checkout, or it works but kind of, you also need to have a different way of approaching those things. And as Raleigh Pauli says, hierarchical escalation versus technical escalation is not the same thing. There's a technical escalation when I don't know what to do. You may think that you all know all the things. I may think that I'm the smartest guy out there, but some things I don't know. And instead of wasting 5 hours trying to figure it out and have the system not working for 5 hours, I need to know who to reach. I need to know, is there a more senior engineer than me in the company that will help me work with this? So all of those things are part of the post-observability world, right? Once you know things, who should react to things and that. So.
My favorite quote on that is I'm not young enough to know everything.
Yeah, that's a good.
Because trust me, younger Quibus knew everything. He could solve any problem. He had a solution. Don't worry.
Yep, I fully agree with that. When you're young, when you feel like you can just, I'll Google it. It's on the internet somewhere. But then you reach the weeds, and it may be fun to do it, to kind of research it, but it's not the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
And
now we've got a few seconds left. Thank you for joining us today, and definitely come join us next week, where we will be chatting to Ian, and Darko said I may not pronounce it. Is it Mackay? I know different people. It's Mckay. It's often different. So Ian, please come correct us next week if we just butchered your name. And by we,
Yeah.
I'm including Darko because I don't want to be alone.
Ian is a person behind a lot of wonderful tools regarding AWS cloud, behind IAM
Former.
and CloudFormer. Former. Yes, Former 2.
Former 2, sorry.
Console Recorder and a bunch of other things. So make sure to join us and once we discuss things with Ian about IAC. So until next week, thank you all, and we will be seeing you on Saturday.
Darko is
not
talking
Saturday,
about his own
Wednesday.
Darko, and I thought I was a sleep deprived one. You sound like you've got kids that kept you up all night.
Well, it may be the coffee. Thank you all. See you